How would you respond if I said JavaScript is the most object-oriented language out there? Some might immediately reject this idea and begin naming all the different ways that JavaScript does not follow the traditional object-oriented programming paradigm. And that is true. It doesn't follow the traditional OOP paradigm. But what I mean by that statement is that JavaScript makes greater use of objects than other languages. Objects are everywhere in JavaScript. In many OOP languages, you must create a class before you can have objects. In JavaScript, objects are available from the get-go. So let's break that down by looking at the different data types that are available in JavaScript. Here are JavaScript's data types. Now, the first 7 data types are considered primitives. These are immutable, meaning they cannot be changed. Where data type number 8, an object, that makes up the rest of what we work with in JavaScript. So you can see there are multiple things missing from this list. Functions, arrays being probably the most common. Well, those are objects. They're included in the object data type. So string, number, boolean, undefined null, symbol, big int, those are all primitive data types. Values cannot be changed. Now, big int is the newest data type that has been added to JavaScript, where the others listed there, if you've been around JavaScript for any time, you're probably pretty familiar with. Now, an object in JavaScript is a composite value, meaning it combines multiple values into a single entity using key value pairs. Another important point about objects is that they're mutable. They can be changed, as I mentioned. So let me jump over to Sublime. We're going to look at some common things we work with in JavaScript that are objects. So here are several things I've set up that are objects. We have a function first. We have an array. Here is a user-defined object. We have a date. We have a set. We have a map. These are all available in JavaScript, things we can work with, but they're all objects. Now, because they're all objects, they have the attributes of objects, and that's what I want to show really quick. So if I open up the console, and the one function that we did define was test_fun. If I do a console.dir on test_fun, let's see what we can look at. We can open up that function and we can see that it has properties and methods. For example, the length property of functions, that indicates how many arguments have been passed in to that function. And as with all objects in JavaScript, it is associated with a prototype. And inside of that, we have additional methods which we can call on. Now, prototypal inheritance is another concept that we will talk about, and it's a very important concept in JavaScript. So we won't go into that in detail here. But let's take a look at what we can do with this function since it is an object. I can add a property to it, my own property. And that property can have a primitive data type associated with it, or it can have another type of object. So now I have a property added to this function that I can display. So basically, this is when this function was created, because I used a date object and associated it with a function object. Now we also had an array out there. Let's take a look at that really quick. We can see how the array is set up as an object. It has a property. It has a prototype with a bunch of methods that we can access. And once again, we can add our own properties to an array object. I'll just give it a name property and set it to a string, my array. So we can see from that really quick demonstration that these are all objects. A lot of the things we work with commonly in JavaScript are objects. And that's why I make that statement that JavaScript is the most object-oriented language, because we are constantly working with objects. Now, another thing to be aware of is even the primitive data types that I mentioned, many of them have what is called an object wrapper. And that gives them some features that are attributable to objects. Let me give you an example. Let's set up a string here. So here we have our string. Now, what's available with a string? What can we do with a string? Well, the string object wrapper has methods associated with it and properties. For example, we can do str.length. That's a property associated with a string, and it returns the number of characters in that string. As you can see, there are also a number of methods available with a string. I'm going to use the split method. And we'll create an array from that string. And here we have an array with 2 elements in it because I split on the space. And so it split between the 2 words, created an array. So one of the methods that's available on strings. So these primitive data types even have what we call string object wrappers, which allow us to work with these primitives like objects. So the main takeaway is that objects are everywhere, and the influence of objects are everywhere within JavaScript. And that is such an important concept to remember when working with JavaScript. And because objects are everywhere in JavaScript, it's very common for us to work with things using dot syntax. I specify the object or the string object wrapper like I've done in this case. I use a period and then I access the property or the method as we've seen here. And that's available for all objects and object wrappers in JavaScript. And so many of the things that we work with in JavaScript have methods or have properties that allow us to do more. And those methods, properties, may be inherited from the prototype, but either way, they're available for the objects that we're working with. Whether it be a user-defined object which we created, an array, a function, or a primitive that's wrapped in an object. Those things are available for us, and therefore makes this concept important to understand. All right, let's move on.